what is the difference between being a stand-up comedian in the UK versus when you come to the States and you want to make it? Tell me the significant differences. Are the comedy clubs all the same? Do you have to grease the wheels and be friends with certain people to get time on stage? Like, tell me the rite of passage, if you will.
Well, in England, at the time that I was starting out, there were a lot of comedy clubs, and they all paid good money. So the difference is, if you became good and you got in at those comedy clubs, you'd get regular work. And it didn't matter whether you were famous or not, because the audiences went to the comedy clubs based on the comedy club's reputation. They didn't know who was going to be on. It's similar to how the comedy scene is in New York with the Comedy Cellars and the Gothams. For the most part, the Comedy Cellar people just go there because they know it's the Comedy Cellar and they know that they're going to get a great night of comedy. They don't necessarily know who's going to be on. And that's how the comedy scene was in England. You went, they booked you, everybody got the same money. Whether you were on the beginning of the show or the end of the show, everybody got whatever it was, $200 a set. And the MC got a little bit more because he had to be, or he or she had to be there all night. Whereas in London, I could do a set here, finish my set, and then jump in the car or jump on my motorbike, go to another comedy club, do another set. So I could make $400-600 a night just running around doing shows. So that was the joy of doing comedy. And then when doing the comedy clubs, when you got to a stage in your career where people started to come to see you, if you were starting to get on television and starting to get known, then you transcended the comedy clubs into small theaters. So I did comedy clubs for about 7-8 years, and I started to build a good audience, and I started to get little bits of stuff on television. So people started to know me and go, "Oh, you're that girl off the TV." So then I transcended the comedy clubs and started booking my own theaters, because I'd go to a comedy club and as soon as I walk on stage, they'd go, "Gina Yashere," and I'd hear the cheers. And I go, "Oh, those people are cheering really loudly," which means they know who I am. So if I was to go and book my own theater, then rather than just being paid $200 for a set here, if I book a small theater for 100 people and all those people are paying $10 each to come and see me, then I'm going to make a lot more money. So that's what I started doing. I started going into small theaters and building my own thing and doing my own shows. Where it would just be me doing, rather than doing a 20-minute set at a comedy club, it'd be me on my own doing an hour, and then I'd get all the money. So that's what happens. That's the kind of rite of passage in England. You start off at the open mics, then you start getting paid at the comedy clubs. And a lot of comics, the majority of the comics stay at that comedy club level, because not everybody gets on TV. Not everybody gets famous. But if you stay at that comedy club level, you can still make 60 to 100,000 a year just doing comedy clubs. Even if nobody knows who you are. You could run around the country, because there were comedy clubs all over the country. You could run around all the country doing all the comedy clubs and making anywhere between 60 and 100 grand a year, and maybe more if you did corporate shows where a company will go, we need a comedian for our yearly Christmas party, and you'll get 5 or 10,000 or whatever. So as a no-name comedian in England, I was making a good living before I even got to the level where I was doing theaters.
Wow.
Whereas that is pretty much impossible in America.
Absolutely.
Because in America, when I came, and I didn't know that when I came here. So when I came to America, I was like, I'm a comedian. I'm a well-known comedian in England. I'm making a good living here. Once I get to America, I'll just go to the comedy clubs. They'll see how funny I am. I'll start getting booked, and I can at least make 60 grand a year doing comedy clubs in America until I get on TV or get a sitcom or get in a movie or something. That's what I thought. Then I got to LA, and I go to the Improv, and I'm doing a set, and they give me a check for $8. And I'm like,
"Oh no! A check?
What the hell? A check. $8. I remember my first check from the Improv. $8.75. And I was like, what the hell is this? So basically, to headline a comedy club in America, it's a different beast. You have to be famous. So for a comedy club to book you as a headliner and pay you a decent fee, the onus is on you to bring the audience. So when an audience comes to a comedy club to see a headliner, they're coming because they've seen him on a sitcom or seen her on this show, And so you get paid according to that. But if you're not a big name comedian, they don't care how funny you are. You're not putting bums on seats. So when I got to America, I'm like, I'm really funny. I'm selling out theaters all over the country in the UK, and I'm a TV star in the UK. Can you pay me to do comedy? And they're like, we don't know who the hell you are, so nobody's paying to come and see you. You can open for this other comedian who's on a sitcom, and they'll get whatever, $20,000 for the weekend, but you're going to get $8.75.
That's insane.
And that's what was happening in LA. It's very specific to LA, because in LA, the comedy clubs, their attitude is very much, listen, you're in LA, you could be seen by Steven Spielberg. So we're doing you a favor by letting you perform at our comedy club.
For $8.75.
Yeah, that was the attitude. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because the bar staff are being paid, the security are being paid, the people who, everybody else in the comedy club ecosystem is being paid, except for the reason why the audience is there. That didn't make sense to me, and I couldn't understand why LA comedians were putting up with that. I was like, why haven't you guys got a union? This doesn't even make sense to me. But that's just how the system was set up in LA, is everybody wants to be seen, everybody wants to be seen, and they'll do these sets for peanuts and hoping to get an audition out of it, or hoping there's a casting director sitting in the crowd and it will lead to other things. But I'm like, when I came here, I was like, I'm a comedian. I don't care about being an actor. I'm a comedian. Like, in LA, there's a lot of actors pretending to be comedians. So they use stand up as a way to get, as a calling card to get on TV. Then once they get on TV, they never do stand up again. Whereas I am a comedian first and foremost. If I could make $500,000 or $1 million a year just doing stand up, I would never step foot in an audition room. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was me. So when I came here, I was like, I want to do stand up. I don't care about whether there's a casting agent sitting in the crowd. I want to make a living doing what I do, which is stand up. And I struggled for 7 years in LA earning peanuts, and I'd have to keep going. So every month I'd have to go back to England. I'd call my agent in England and I'd go, time for a bank raid. And I'd fly back to England, do a bunch of shows, make my money, and then bring that money back to LA and live off that money, because I was making no money in LA. So
wait, you said it's time for a bank raid. You needed to go get your cash, come back here and stuff. Well, why didn't you want to just stay there in the UK? Why did you want to, quote unquote, do it here in the States?
Because I'd hit a glass ceiling. As a black comedian in England, I'd hit a glass ceiling. I got to a certain level of fame and fortune. And I was coming out with white comedians who were very similar to me in talent. And they were, where I was selling theaters based on my own hard work. I could sell out a 2,000-seater theater, perhaps. My white peers were able to do 17,000-seater stadiums because they were given a lot more opportunities to be on TV. So I'd always be the guest on someone else's TV, but I could never get on someone else's TV show, but I could never get my own TV show as a black woman. Whereas my white peers who I came up with were all getting their own TV shows, which then led to them being exposed to a much larger audience, which meant they can go and do these massive tours. And I was never going to get to that, because the TV industry in England is run by old white men who only give TV shows to other white men. So I'd hit a glass ceiling. And for me, as a child living in England, I'd always known, from the age of 4, I knew that England was not where I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be in America. From childhood, I thought American kids had a better life. Every TV show I saw was American kids running to the beach to hang out with their friends on the beach and riding bikes around town, solving crimes. So I always thought that the kids in America had a much better life. So from childhood, I wanted to be in America. Even when I worked as an engineer, I worked for Otis, which was an American company, because my plan was to transfer and become an engineer in America. My plan had always been to come to America from the age of 4. So then when I started doing comedy, I was like, well, America's the home of comedy. So one day I'm going to go to America and do comedy. So even when I started out, even when I was doing really well in England, I'd fly out to America every year and just go to comedy clubs and just go up and do my stuff just to see if my stuff traveled. So I knew I could perform in America long before I moved here, because I was out here coming out on vacations, going to New York, going to Miami, and just going up at comedy clubs and going, I'm a comedian from England. Let me go up and do 5 minutes. You don't even have to pay me. And I just go up and do 5 minutes. So I always knew. And I knew that and when I hit that glass ceiling in England, that was even more, of an incentive for me to get the hell out.
Yeah, to do what you. So it's interesting. I feel like Hollywood is run by white men, but
Yes,
there is more of an opportunity for you to thrive than there is one in the UK.
Yeah, I always say that I hit the glass ceiling in the UK and I was probably making at that point 150 grand a year.
Uh-huh.
But when you hit the glass ceiling for black performers in America is much higher than the one in the UK.
Yeah.
So even if I hit the glass ceiling in America, I can hit the glass ceiling as a millionaire.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying?
You're right. No, you're right.
So
You're right.
I was like, I'd rather go to America and hit that glass ceiling, because at
You're
least
right.
I'll be a millionaire when I hit it and I can cry in my money.
Yeah.